you get exposed to so much, exposed to a lot of things, like different, like, family systems, different way of living, how some people were brought up, like how some people don't have trauma at all. And they're just living life. This week I had a meeting with someone and I was talking to them and they were like, I was telling about my life and everything. And, like that I'm trying to sell myself. I was trying to sell myself to them about something. And then this person was like, well, if you want to look at the polar opposite of what you just said to me in terms of the most privilege of privilege, that was my life. And the way that they said it, I just burst out laughing. So I was like, this is so funny. It's funny to me now because I think I can see the humor in it. But I think in particular when I was like in my late teens, early 20s, it just triggered grief. Grief in terms of like what my life could have been if it was someone else. What if my cards that I was dealt were different, how my life could have been, like what structure I could have had, and so much and so forth. And so like it was that kind of grievance. So grieving my childhood, grieving my teenage years, grieving my late teen years, then grieving my early 20s. It was like a lot of grieving of self for a long time, a lot of grieving of self, because there was so much loss, a loss of autonomy, a loss of identity, a loss of self, a loss of authenticity, a lot of like just a lot of loss because of a lack of self-discovery, a lack of being, in tune with self.
Like they driving me crazy, like, and my friends be like, it's not that deep, right? And the fam be saying, you're in your feelings, what? All I know is, life is raggedy.
Hello, and welcome back to the Reforming Pessimist podcast. The Reforming Pessimist podcast. It's your girly Abanga. How are you? How are you doing? How is life? Is it life in? How is 2025? Is it treating you well? Are you doing okay? Are you doing good? It's good to be back. And honestly, I am in my natural hair bag. I've always been a natural hair girly. My friend Rahma, yeah, Ray of Sunshine on Insta, body, literal body. Because I've got like really fine hair. I don't know what I'm talking about hair, but anyway, we'll start with that. I've got really fine because I've changed hair, so I must well talk about it. I've got really fine hair, like my hair's like really thin. And kind of when I was growing up, I kind of didn't know what to do with my hair. Like I didn't know how to play about with it and have fun with it and enjoy it. And then when I went to uni, my girlfriend Rav, she helped me dye my hair like honey. How would you like? Is it honey blonde? It wasn't honey blonde. It was ginger. Yeah, she helped me dye the ginger. What did I say? Ginger. It wasn't really red hair like that. But anyway, it was some kind of like bleach blonde, and I really liked that for a bit. But I also kind of did, and I was trying to transition into going to natural because relaxers just didn't work for me. Like when I relaxed my hair, like when I was in high school, one of my teachers used to be like, "Oh my God, the ignorance." She'd be like, "Oh my God, you look electrocuted." He would be like, "Oh my God, you look electrocuted." So, that was very interesting. But yeah, so like relaxers never worked for me. So I've always wanted to be like a natural hair girly, just to kind of like maintain my hair. Anyway, I met my friend Rama in third year, and she really taught me how to look after my natural hair, guys. Like she made me fall in love with my natural hair. She made me fall in love with how to look after it, how to care for it, how to, maintain it, I guess. And in a sense, I'm like really, really grateful, really, really grateful for my hair. All right. I had to change the lighting. So yeah, really, really grateful for my hair. So, I'm back to shore. I actually cut my hair a few years ago. I might insert a picture actually in terms of like different short hairstyles that I've done, but I think that it will also suit in or fit into the podcast episode really well in terms of the topic I'm going to do today. I came in ready with the outfit to represent the conversation I'm about to have. So let's do a check-in. You always do. And then let's start the episode. Yeah, let's start the episode.
Raggedy. So raggedy.
So check-in time. Let's go. How have I been? Honestly, I started off the year really, really great. I started off in like a really happy place, in a really good place, in a really peaceful, serene, calm place. I was doing really well, like really, really well. As anybody who may be healing from, whatever traumatic experiences that you've had or whatever, you know, things that you've gone through, it ebbs and flows. But for the first time ever, like, this was the best thing. And I was also recovering from like surgery. So it was like really nice. And then I kind of had an encounter, not of fault of my own, because I'm actually really trying to protect my peace, but I had an encounter that messed me up a little. It was very triggering, like very, very triggering. And the funny thing is, guys, it was a very tiny thing. That's the sad part, but it was a really tiny thing. But then I'm also giving myself a lot of grace because I realized that, like, the littlest thing is like sometimes it's the straw, right, that breaks the camel's back for a lot of people. And it's like there is always like a reservation and an acceptance of a lot of things. And one time there's like that one straw that just blows things up. And I think that was the case for me in this particular situation. And so that kind of threw me off a lot. It threw me off a lot. And I'm also finally in a space where I'm really paying attention to myself. I think that the theme for myself and my therapist this year is particularly with body. And I can't wait to when I get to the stage where I can talk about body and yeah, discuss body and healing the body and stuff like that. That's really exciting because I'm healing my body. It's a lot of things that I had never before paid attention to. So when this triggering event happened, the lack of safety that I've always felt in my body, it came back. And before I couldn't really like pinpoint and be like, oh, this is a lack of safety thing, or there's a lack of like my body being back in defense mode and being protective. I had never even thought of that. So this was the first time ever, like, I'm really like facing that and paying attention to that. So it's really exciting because I'm like, oh, I'm actually within myself now. I'm actually feeling the things that I'm meant to feel, right? But at the same time too, it's like, oh my God, it's so shattering because I'm literally in the presence of it. And I've mentioned a few episodes, guys, all my vices are gone. Like I have no more vices. I made the radical decision to cut all my vices off. So I have no vices. That means no coping mechanisms, no drinking, no nothing. Just no anything that I used to use. And at some point one day I'll be vulnerable about it, but no anything I used to use to kind of like get me to, to basically mask my feelings and hide away from whatever thing that I was struggling to deal with in that moment. I don't have that anymore. So that was also an experience. It was also an experience of like dealing with this like triggering moment whilst being sober. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. Whilst being sober. That was a tough one. That was a real tough one. But I'm getting through it. Like I think that sometimes, in a sense, when things happen, we underestimate how much that little experience or that little trigger or that encounter, how much it has an impact, and also how long that impact lasts for. This encounter was like a very small encounter in particular, like it was between myself and someone, but from that person's point of view, probably they were like, oh, this is just a little thing. But in my point of view, this was like a 2 to 3 week recovery from just that encounter. And I don't think that sometimes people realize that the power that certain things may have, and particularly when you're somebody who's surviving like certain abuses emotionally or physically, and it is combined together. And so like I really noticed like things like some of my PTSD stuff coming up, like my body really reacting like viscerally and aggressively, and just like sleepless nights. So going back to being sleep deprived again, going back to ruminating and not being able to shut my brain down, and going back to basic place that I have kind of come out of and I was doing really well, going back into that place again, and now having to find tools to calm me down and to basically check on myself, to basically like calm my body down, calm my mind down, be like, it's okay, we are safe, there's nothing wrong with us. Because it doesn't matter what it is, it's like sometimes my body and my mind cannot distinguish between something little and something small because it's like very hypersensitive and hyper protective. And so just being able to be in a place where I'm like, okay, it's not bad, it's okay, like calm down. And my therapist was really helpful. She was like, okay, let's use these tools, like, let's do these things. And it's been really, really helpful in that case. So it's been a challenging couple of weeks, I'll say for sure. But on the positive side, I would say that like, it's a different experience because before like something little like that would literally put me in depression for a while. It would trigger me into depression and I wouldn't even come back for a bit. But I wasn't depressed. I think the more so I was sad. And I think that is me really feeling my emotions. And guys, that is massive. That is so massive. That is so, so massive. Like, that is just big. I remember one time when I was in therapy, my therapist was like, okay, here's an emotional wheel, girl. Which emotion are you feeling? Like, which emotion are you feeling? Because a bitch didn't know what emotion was. I had one emotion. And it was deep sadness. And that's all that I knew. There was no other emotion. And then there was the false facade of happiness because I didn't know what true happiness was. I was just performing happiness. So there was that false facade of happiness and there was just sadness. That was the only emotion that I felt. And I didn't even know that under the umbrella of sadness, there was anger, there was irritation, there was frustration. You know what I mean? There was like, there was just like, so many other emotions under the umbrella. And I think my therapist at some point had to be like, okay, sis, this is the wheel. All the emotions are there. Pick one and describe it to me. Because she'll be like, what do you feel? And I'm like, I don't know. And she'll be like, and again, it speaks to a lot of things. There was a conversation I had with a friend where I was like, there are so many things in my life where I'm so hyper developed in, like very hyper developed in, because it was part of survival. It was part of me being able to thrive and move forward and go forward. And there is just a lot that I'm very stunted in, like really, really stunted in. And even though I would consider myself somebody who's very emotionally intelligent and emotionally mature, there's also a lot of aspects of my emotions that are very, very stunted, that are very, very immature because I didn't really get to develop them, particularly at the key stages of my life when I was young, and also harness and grow in them. So it's a long way to go. Like, but it's a healing journey and I'm documenting my healing journey. So I hope anybody who's in that stage, I feel you. I feel you. I'm there too, girl. I'm there. Mate, bro, whomever, beloved. I'm there too, and I see you and I hear you, and I hope that as I share my journey, that you're validated. But overall, a girl is good. I've been listening to music, I've been doing walks, I've been working out. I have still been lifting myself through this whole thing, and that is good. It makes me happy that I'm not in bed rotting. And I'm outside, even though I'm really sad and I'm really triggered, and all of a sudden I'm still, doing things and moving about. It makes me really happy. It shows really so much progress. It shows so much growth. So much growth. Okay, all right, let's launch into the episode because I've got so much to say and a lot to talk about. So, this week's episode, what am I talking about? Oh my God, I'm really excited about this one because I think that this is a very, very interesting one. It fits in, and it fits into the team. So, today I came in my best grieving outfit, all black, with a little bit of white there. And of course, it's not like me without color. Come on, look at the face. Isn't it? You want to eat me, don't you? Eat me. Yeah, eat me. I want to talk about grief. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think that there will be a lot of grief episodes. Because I think that there's not, you can do healing without grief. I don't think there's a way to do healing without grief. Um, and in a sense, I think that like when we talk about grief, I think that like a lot of us minimize grief to a lot of someone like a physical person, right? Like you lost somebody physically and you grieve them, you grieve the loss of them, the relationship we had, whatever could have been, if they were still around, how you miss them. And grief is I think it's one of the experiences one of the human experiences that we have that is long standing, that never goes away, that never fades away, comes back, that ebbs and flow. That can be intense, that can bring joy, that can bring laughter, and also sadness. Grief encompasses so many emotions. Grief is so complex and grief is also so beautiful. And grief can be truly, truly healing, in a sense, because it kind of gets you to, face certain things, say goodbye to them, and also kind of like move on in a sense. If you grieve properly anyway. And I think when you walk this life, one thing that I think that this is kind of a skill that I developed at a very young age as a way to kind of protect myself and to survive, was to be able to be attuned to people and observe people and pay attention to people. That's one of the skills that I developed very, very quickly, particularly in terms of the environment that I was growing up in. And I think that it's become a skill now that I use so well in my personal life, in my career. Like, it's just become a skill that like serves me so well. Something that I use. And I need to also do an episode on that in terms of like things that comes from trauma, that can actually be a benefit to you in terms of your like day-to-day adult life and adulting and experiences, like, things that sometimes you may think, oh my God, it was crippling to me, can be actually, in a sense, flipped around and turned into a benefit for you. So I walk around and I speak to a lot of people and I have a lot of conversations with people because that's who I am. And I speak to people who've been going through grief, and you can tell that some people, they're still stuck in grief because it's like really hard to shake grief, a loss of something, and particularly a loss of someone, particularly for people who really had a connection, particularly for them, maybe their parent, their sibling, somebody who meant a lot to them. A loss of that person can really stop someone's life. It can literally like stop someone's life right in a track, dead there, and they can't move forward. They can't do anything. It's like they're living life, but the life is passing them by because they just can't move past this grief, this loss, this big thing that meant a lot to them. They just can't move past it. So grief is very, 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 very powerful. Grief is something that is just defining for everybody on this earth. And I think the grief is also very much equal across the board. Grief doesn't have favorites. It's a lot of things about life doesn't have favorites, or mental illness doesn't have favorites. It's like there's certain things that, like, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, it will impact you and it will affect you. You will lose someone, you will lose something. And it's just that on that. It's a fact. And I think that for me in particular, my relationship with grief has been a little bit different. Very different to a lot of people's experiences, I would say, for sure. I think the first encounter of grief that I had was like when I was a teen. Not even just I think that, okay, I'll say a teen because I think it was my first encounter to grieving a possibility, what I mean, of what life could be, of what life is in a sense. And I think that also it was my first awareness to depression. My experience with depression in particular is that I've been depressed, chronically depressed my whole life from when I could remember. Very chronically depressed. But I think the reason I was also chronically depressed is because of also my foundation and my upbringing and where I started from and the kind of life I was exposed and introduced, particularly in my very primitive year when I was like a toddler, very, very young. And so what's that book called again? Okay, this book. I don't know if you can see it properly, but this book is by Basil van der Kolk. And I've been listening to him a lot, actually. He's done a lot of talks, and he's got this amazing book called The Body Keeps the Score, right? And I'm going through the book. I've got a lot of books that I've got to go through because I feel like they're really helping me understand myself and attune to myself better. And in particularly with this book, it talks about how, like, trauma is stored in your body. Like, a lot of things happen and it's stored in your body. And there's so much that the mind can take, there's so much the mind can handle. And because of that, the mind forgets or the mind suppress or the mind mask, but the body always remembers. And I think that there were even spaces that I was in, like as I moved on through life, where those spaces were actually much, much better to the space that I used to be in before. But my body had not forgotten. Therefore, my body was constantly in panic mode, constantly under stress, constantly under worry. And therefore, any little thing that happened in those environments where they were actually a little bit more safer than the environment I used to be in, I got triggered, which means that it then led me to depression. So the depression kept coming back because there was just so much that my body was carrying and holding that then got me to constantly be in panic mode, constantly be in defense mode, hence the PTSD. And then also there's complexities to the PTSD because of other things that happened across the gaff, or just through the journey. Just through the journey. It was a shit show, guys. It was a shit show. For some of us, it was just a shit show. And you have to have dark humor about it, because if you don't have dark, that's why some of the best comedians are the most traumatized group. You know what I mean? Most traumatized, most mentally ill. Because for you to be able to understand humor and tune humor in that way, you have to have a crooked mind, a little bit of a crooked mind. I told you guys about the crazy, isn't it? It's the fun side out here. It's the fun side out here. So I used to get depressed a lot. And I think now I'm also, as an adult, as somebody who's like very, very mature now, I know that the depression was definitely part of grief. Basically me grieving, like, because I'll be around environments where I saw people in a proper stable system. And it wasn't the most perfect stable system, I'll say. Like, you know what I mean? It was like a system that still existed for some people. And I will call it maybe jealousy, or maybe like wanting to also have that kind of security, or wanting to be able to have that kind of protection, and knowing that that protection didn't exist for me. And that would then turn into grief, that would turn into sadness. And then, we all know that like sadness at this extreme is basically depression. Let's just call it what it is. So that was where I kind of would get to. So that's when I really started to grieve. And then you go into the world and you get exposed. You get exposed to so much, exposed to a lot of things, like different, like, family systems, different way of living, how some people were brought up, like how some people don't have trauma at all. And they're just living life. This week I had a meeting with someone, and I was talking to them, and they were like, I was telling about my life and everything, and like that I'm trying to sell myself. I was trying to sell myself to them about something, and then this person was like, "Well, if you want to look at the polar opposite of what you just said to me in terms of the most privilege of privilege, that was my life." And the way that they said it, I just burst out laughing. So it's like, this is so funny. It's funny to me now because like I think I can see the humor in it. But I think in particular when I was like in my late teens, early 20s, it just triggered grief. Grief in terms of like what my life could have been if it was someone else. What if my cards that I was dealt were different? How my life could have been, like what structure I could have had, and so much and so forth. And so like it was that kind of grieving. So grieving my childhood, grieving my teenage years, grieving my late teen years, then grieving my early 20s. It was like a lot of grieving of self for a long time. A lot of grieving of self, because there was so much loss, a loss of autonomy, a loss of identity, a loss of self, a loss of authenticity, a lot of like just a lot of loss because of a lack of self-discovery, a lack of being, in tune with self. And a lot of us just live that life because either culture, community perpetuating that, or perpetuating and enabling it. You know what I mean? In a sense, growing up in an environment where like some people are seen as second class citizens because you're a certain gender, you know what I mean, and you need to be a certain way, being in oppressive environments, like these are real things that a lot of us go through. And like if you're in a very much of a sociological, political world, these are conversations that I had across the board all the time in terms of like inequalities, you know what I mean, being in an oppressive place and stuff like that. It impacts across the board so many of us. So I wasn't unique in those experiences. And we as a society, there's always like a social structure, a hierarchy, for some reason I think that as humans need to abide by. And in this hierarchy, there always have to be one person that's above the other to be able to exist. And we also live in a world where there is, power control, you know what I mean? And we underestimate how much a lot of us seek power to be able to oppress others so that we can feel protected ourselves and we can feel safe ourselves. And in that protection, and also in that protection and maintaining of power as well, using as a way to harm others. It's a real thing. It's a real thing that a lot of us go through out here that we just don't talk about, either because it's masked or it's hidden behind culture. And then culture perpetuates that. And that's one thing I loved about, again, and I think I talk about Chimamanda a lot because, again, she's West African. And I think that in terms of the themes that I talk about a lot, she's like one of the foremost authors that I've heard of who really push on this, where, she talks about, particularly in one of her either public speaking events or in one of her books, she talks about like, feminism and how, in terms of like gender structures in particular, it's man-made. All these cultural things that we have in place, they are man-made. So why, as human beings, as we evolved, and as we grow and as the world change, why don't we adapt the culture to the change, to our evolution, to basically the world moving forward? But in a sense, sometimes we want to maintain these power structures and cultures in place because one group gets benefited more than the other. So being part of all of these, in my little world, I am feeling it, and it's really impacting me in a sense, like really impacting me. So it's also like really enhancing a lot of grief that I'm going through, a lot of things that I'm really realizing about myself and my experience in this world, and all of that stuff. And then I finally faced my first like loss of a person grief when I lost my mom. And I didn't have a relationship with my mom per se due to extenuating circumstances that I now have a much more clarity and understanding of. And in a very nuanced, humanistic way, not in a very much of an emotional sense, but in a very human, like, human way, and also very nuanced way as well, because I think that when we live in a world, like, there's complexities to everything, and I think that we want to kind of simplify things and be like, it's just this. um and it's good to always challenge ourselves and challenge our minds in terms of being like, why is one thing so, for me, I don't believe in things being direct and being straight. And the reason why I don't believe things being direct and being straight is because human beings are fucking complex. We are all so complex. And so to minimize things as being like direct and straight is BS. It's just complete bullshit. And I think that my little brain growing up, I realized that, there was just certain things that just didn't make sense. And I'm like, okay, I need to figure that out. But that's the story for another day. So I think that my loss of hair as well was kind of like an interesting experience for sure. And also, it then triggered me to even grieve more of a lot of things. It was like a huge trigger to now really confront myself as a person, confront my journey, confront the things that I've been through, really, really like face things. Mostly because like, as I got older, I looked more and more like my mom. I'm as big as my mom, like in terms of my body, in terms of like the way that I I look so much like my mom. Um, and yeah, because I look so much like her, grieving her was like very interesting, particularly for somebody that I didn't have a relationship with ever. And it was just like bringing up so much things that I needed to confront that I wasn't ready to confront, that I was not comfortable with. And that does set me off on one of the most challenging year and a half of my life. And also finding similarities between myself and my mom, and particularly beginning to find a lot of illnesses that I'm having. For instance, like having PCOS. I know my mom had PCOS as well, like being pre-diabetic when my mom was very diabetic, and one of the reasons why she passed was because she was basically like diabetic, and all the subsequent, what's it called, all the subsequent illnesses that fall under being diabetic as well. And struggling with my blood pressure, like from at a very young age, like a very, very young age. So it was kind of like there was just so many colorations that kind of started to get me to panic and be scared and start to really like, okay, be like, this is difficult, this is hard, but you need to grieve. You need to start grieving, not just your mom, but grieve yourself, grieve your life, grieve your experiences, grieve a lot of things. And I was really hiding from that. I didn't want to kind of face, it was just too uncomfortable for me, because I'm like, this is too much for my body, too much stress for everything. I need to just be at peace. But my life is not at peace because there is literally a tank, if not a tank, who knows, an endless bottomless pit of baggage, of issues that needed to be cleared for me to really be free, for me to have the mental space to be able to be relaxed and be part of life and enjoy it and be happy. And I was not clearing those things. And a loss of a person triggering that for me to be like, oh, I need to really confront and face that. And so, beginning of the year, a year before, 2 years ago, I think a few months after I lost my mom, and just like I had, again, thanks to my friend who made me fall in love with my natural hair so much, my natural had become like really massive and big. And there's this picture of my mom in her big afro. I'll try and see if I can insert a picture in the episode so you can see it, of me and my mom, and it's her with her afro, and I looked exactly like her. And I couldn't look at my face anymore. I just couldn't look at my face anymore. I couldn't look at my face anymore. So I took scissors and I cut my hair. I just literally started to chopped it right to the bottom, went to the barbers and got it shaved, because I was like, you know what, I need to see my face in a different light. Grief gets you to do some crazy shit. Like when you're grieving, when anybody's grieving, yeah, and you're on your craziness, please leave them be, because I was on my craziness during that period. I almost lost relationships because, I was moving mad in certain ways. Like it was a tough time. So please, like if you have friends who are really going through like hardcore grief periods, like give them grace, give them time, give them space, because grief is not a joke. Grief changes you. Grief have a certain impact on you that like is very deep. and particularly for the people who are willing to face it anyway. It's not everybody who's willing to, because grief is challenging. And actually, a good TV episode that has done so well in terms of describing grief is Big Mouth. Is it Big Mouth? No, no, not Big Mouth. Actually, Human Resources, because they have the what's it called? The spin-off. And the spin-off is this Human Resources, which is also really funny. I love that TV show. Netflix is really going downhill, guys. Netflix is going downhill. They should come up with so many good TV shows. But anyway, there's this Human Resource episode where like there's a mom with dementia and she's about to die, and grief goes to the son, and grief comes, and grief is trying to comfort the son to prepare the son for the mom's death, and the son is like, hell no. Like, none of the families like willing to receive grief. They're like, hell to the effing no. And I think that's a really good encapsulation of what grief is to some people. Go check, I don't know what episode it is, but it's in Human Resources. And Human Resources covers so many different emotions and, you know, how we experience human emotions, like on different level. So go check it out if you have access to Netflix. And if you don't, please go find it bootlegged. It's a really good TV show. It's very naughty, so be prepared for that. Very, very naughty. Like, the sexual teams are like crazy. Go check it out. Human Resources. Anyway, so like, yeah, I was going through my time. So I cut my hair and I dyed it to kind of give myself like, you know, a little bit of a look. And and then I then kind of had fun with it. Like when I turned 30 last year, I dyed my hair silver. I felt like a baddie. And I'm inserting a picture there too, because a girl was sexy. I'm still sexy, but yeah, can you see? I was loving it myself. I had done well in my grief in that moment, but I think the grief was still ongoing. I'm even saying that the grief is still ongoing now because there are moments now where like I have unpacked a lot. I have dealt with a lot now, and there are moments where like I think back to certain things, certain actions, certain behaviors, and I break down and I cry because it's like, you know what I mean? It's just realizing things in a certain way, being a mature woman in a certain way, seeing things from a certain perspective now, and just being so sad, being so heartbroken um about it. But my journey with grief, I've come to kind of see it as a part of me, because I'm like, to be able to heal, to be able to evolve, to be able to grow, to be able to kind of be the version of myself that I want to be. It's a lot of grieving. And even like in terms of one of the aspects of grief as well that I've not even talked about, is like a loss of people, like, you know, because I'm changing, I'm evolving, I'm becoming authentically myself, and just people that I valued so much because I was at a certain place and I saw myself in a certain way, and therefore like our relationships worked. And then now I've evolved, I've moved on, I'm authentically becoming myself, and the relationship that I have with these people clashing and basically we bumping us because we are beginning to not agree on things. Our values are very different because I'm really authentically standing in my own self, and you know, the relationship becoming much more tumultuous, and having to kind of let the relationship go, knowing how much of an attachment I have to these people, knowing how much I love these people, knowing how much I value and appreciate these people because they've had impact in my life, they've really benefited me, they've really like helped me out in so many ways. People who gave me a voice when I didn't have a voice, who told me to basically stand up for myself, who told me that I deserved more than that. But because culturally, or basically in terms of values, we do not align and we are outgrowing each other, that loss of those relationships, they hit hard, they're very painful, they're very, very difficult. And I think that that's why a lot of people talk about how difficult it is to have friendship breakups, even two romantic breakups per se, like how difficult it is to have friendship breakups, because like there's a connection when it comes to the relationship you have with your friends, and the loss of them, that is much more painful than romantic relationship, I'll say. So there's also the grief of that, and then a grief of like community that you maybe have been part of, that the communities that you were part of, basically you don't feel like you belong in, or you've never felt like you belonged in, but you really wanted to be part of it, because as human beings, we're built to be communal, we're built to be wanting to be part of a group, and we're built to be wanting to be existing as part of like a unit, and to be able to feel like, oh, to be in a place where you feel like, oh, I need to separate myself from this community because either they are harmful to me, they do not understand me, or I stand differently to them. It's tough because a lot of us don't want to leave our community behind. We don't want to leave our people behind. Like, you know, a lot of us maintain relationship with people in our communities. And when I talk about communities, I'm talking about extended family, family members, people that you've grown around with, all of that stuff. That's what I mean by community. When you something you maintain relationship with community because you're like, oh, at least because in particular because there's a family or cultural relation to that. You maintain that relationship because you're like, I may not agree with you completely, you offend me here and there, I let you cross my boundaries here and there. We accept that still because at the end of the day, there's love, there's that community that we are willing to. The community sometimes is more important than some of our boundaries because they're like, we love these people. And there's a conversation I had with a friend actually recently where we're talking about the fact that like sometimes people in our communities don't understand that we maintain relationship with them not because they're perfect or they're the best type of relationship we have, because the best type of relationship I have are with my friends because we align value wise, we are very much similar people and we know how to respect us. We know how to respect each other and we know how to not cross each other's boundaries and stuff like that. But when it's community, that like they don't fully truly understand who you are, they don't get you, they don't see you, but there's still love there. And we allow that because again, that's our community. You want to be part of that, you want to belong to it. Like if I walk into the world, I want to represent and be like, I am from that tribe, I am from that country, that's my community. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's a pride in being part of a community. There's a pride in that. And for a lot of people, in particularly when it comes to the healing journey, there's a place that you get to where you have to give up on the community, where you had to let the community go. And there was moments through the course of my life where I had to keep letting members of the community go slowly in a very painful, in a very excruciating way due to the decisions that I was making to either protect myself, protect my peace, or maintain a certain level of power, in all honesty. So that grief in itself is also challenging. And so you can have a life where it's just encompassing of like grief across the board, where you're constantly grieving. And I must say that it is something, this continuous grief can be very impactful on some people in terms of how their outlook on life is, how they view people, how they view relations, because it makes them probably more pessimistic than they want to. Again, Reform and Pessimist podcast. Brandon, how they view the world. I've met also many people who are like, I do not trust people. I do not want to build a relationship with people and I do not want to be part of a community. I am very careful because the community has done this. The community has done that. People have done this. Friendships have done that. And it makes me so sad because as a group of species on this earth, one thing that is so required for all of us to be able to sustain and be in this world is to be in relation, to be with community, to be with each other. And there are conflicts, disagreements, and just differences that come into place that can really define and attune us and change us in terms of the way that, life, human, and the complexities of everything ends up being. So grief is it's a very, very fascinating thing. I speak around a lot of the stuff I've been through because in all honesty, I'm not comfortable sharing a lot of them right now. Probably will be in a book. Because I can hide behind or who knows. But I'm not ready. But I will definitely insinuate what I mean in a lot of my episodes because I think that that's kind of where I feel comfortable to be able to talk about things. But grief is real. Grief is a big thing, and a lot of us go through it. A lot of us experience it, and when we do experience it, I hope that we give ourselves grace and give ourselves permission to be less hard on ourselves through it. And whatever mishaps, whatever, failings or whatever bad habits that we pick up or whatever that we basically use to kind of deal with whatever griefs that we're going through, either is basically a loss of life, a loss of experiences, a loss of something, not physical, but something, an experience through your life, or it's a loss of actually somebody physical, like a loved one, somebody that meant a lot to you. Either those types of griefs, you know what I mean? Allow yourself to go through it without judgment, without a lot of punitive actions to yourself, and just a lot more love for yourself and a lot more grace for yourself, because grief can breed a very dark place for us. Now, the reason why I decided to do this episode was because whilst I was going through grief last year, whilst I actually was coming out of my grief for the first time ever, I was saying, I was like, I'm almost joyous and almost happiest for the first time. I would say in the most happiest, most joyous, and most free from myself, from my mind, from everything over the last year. I journal So I write things down when I'm feeling certain way, you know what I mean? Just to kind of put things down to remind myself of things that I'm saying and stuff like that. And I'll go back to some of my journals. I'll go back to some of the things that I wrote or stuff like that to kind of just get myself to where I am now, where I've built my self-esteem and I built my confidence and I built a lot of love for myself and appreciation for myself for how much value I have. I write things down. So I wrote this down. I said that that's kind of what jogged me to kind of talk about grief in this episode. So give me a sec. Let me find it. And like I wrote this down in a place where I was like feeling so happy and so sad at the same time. So over the last year, in particular, last year was like kind of one of the most like I did an episode my most toughest and exhilarating year, right? So it was tough because I was going through a lot of grief and actually having a lot of radical acceptance, like accepting a lot of things very radically, like very, very radically that I didn't want to. Guys, we really hate the truth. We also don't like accepting things. In a sense, sometimes we like to be in, I think that like there's a disassociation to the truth to kind of help us be able to handle things. And I think that I disassociated a lot. I think that that's how I've lived my life and how I've survived to get here. You disassociate from your body, and that's why I'm now focusing on my body in therapy. Because I wasn't listening to my body because my body was like, truth, truth, truth. And until my body started hurting, I was like, no, I don't want to face the truth. But we disassociate ourselves from the truth because I think that sometimes accepting a certain level of whatever delusion that we tell ourselves is the truth, in a sense, maybe help us kind of deal with the severity and the gravity of what the truth really is. Because the truth can hurt, the truth can be really painful, and the truth can be really crippling. Really, really crippling. And I think that like last year I was going through a space where like I was crippled, basically. I was crippled by the truth. And I woke up every day just thinking, oh my goodness, how am I gonna survive today? Like, how am I gonna deal with today? Having to face the truth, having to face myself, having to face the reality of things. And then now in a completely different space, different mindset, waking up every day dancing, singing, doing my own karaoke in my room, walking, having fun because I'm in a different place. I'm in a different world. I'm really happy. I'm doing well. It's weird. And so like, this was one of the things I put in my journal where I said, my life became so happy and I'm really sad about that. And I put in quotation marks. Wow. So life can be like this for some people if I allow myself to be and be free, leaving my burdens behind. So sad, but so happy and light. And yeah, I'm going to end the episode with this. Is that I am so sad that I'm happy right now. I'm also grieving the fact that I'm in a happy place, which is also so weird, right? So weird. It's so weird. It's really a weird place to be where like finally you are happy, you're doing well, things are going great for you, but there is a lot of sadness because the thing that, again, the sadness is probably coming from a place of like recognizing all the loss that you had to take, all the shots, all the all the things you basically had to give up to be able to get yourself to this happy place. For people who are like, being through either tumultuous relationship, difficult experiences, trauma, whatever, to be able to get yourself to a place of peace and tranquility and protection, all that you had to give up to have it. Or all the things that you had to do to have it. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes the upset that you have with yourself because of the desperate things that you had to basically do to be able to get yourself to a place that you needed to get to. Like all of those kind of like ebbing and flowing emotions that you have to go through to accept that, like, you go yourself to where you need to get to. But mostly though, I would say in terms of percentages, because when I used to do my audio podcast without doing video, I used to kind of put in percentages. And I'll say that like I'm really like 80% on the way in terms of like my happiness. Like I'm a really happy person right now. I think that deep down as well, I'm a really happy person. I'm realizing I wouldn't say like I'm such a pessimist, but I think that life taught me to be pessimistic. My experiences taught me to be pessimistic and be very fearful and very cautious of life and living life. But more so I am just like grateful. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm really thankful for the life I have right now. I have so much gratitude because I know there are some people who go through similar things that I go through and never come out of it. I know there's some people who go through similar things that I've gone through and I've experienced, and they never see happiness, or they see some happiness but not fully, not entirely. Some people die before they even get the chance to be able to do that. I've also seen that before. And so like, to know that I'm here, I see it as such a privilege. I see it as such a blessing. I have so much gratitude for what I have, like the life that I'm living right now. I have so much gratitude for it. I have so much gratitude for the things that I've got, even the experiences that I have, and how those experiences have basically fine-tuned me to be the person that I am today. Even more so now, I'm just so grateful for certain people that I had in my life, across my life, where in those times that I was with those people, because of where I was, I didn't find gratitude for them, but I find so much gratitude for them now. For people that are in my life and out of my life, I'm just so grateful, not because of the either relationship turned sour or whatever, but in terms of what they served me during one of the most challenging or toughest or whatever time that I was like going through. It's like an appreciation for so much. It takes a community. Like, I even talk about community and lots of community, but I also say that it takes a community to build a person. It takes a community to make somebody like me be able to be in a place where I'm saying that I'm really happy and I'm doing well. Like, I always say to some of my loved ones that I'm standing on the backs of a lot of people. Like, it's a lot of people that built me up. It's not just me. Like, if it was just me, guys, I would be a different person. This podcast probably wouldn't exist. A lot of these things wouldn't exist. I mean, a lot of people have got me here. Either they're aware of it or not. A lot of people have got me here, and I always try my best to express as much gratitude to them as I can. But I'm still like, allowing myself to also experience the final, or some final parts of this grief as well, of being happy and sometimes feeling sad, because I go back to a certain memory, or I get triggered into something, and then I get really sad about it, because I'm reminded of like, a lot of the losses, like in terms of people, in terms of relationships, in terms of everything that kind of got me here, because I needed to get myself to a place where I was at my most at peace and I was at my most happiest. So yeah, grief is a very interesting thing. I can't wait to talk more about grief later on down the line. I hope my fit and the look, even the flowers in the background, guys, fit this grief episode. And I hope that everything I talked about, I hope that some of you found relatability to it. And I hope that you found validation as well. And I hope that, like, hopefully it's helping you to understand yourself more. If you see yourself in me, if you see your story in me, whichever part of my narrative that fits you, that, called to you, that you heard, I hope that that touched you. And I really hope that, like, the little optimism that I'm gaining through this whole process, that you're also receiving the optimism in yourself to also help reform your own pessimism, and to help, like, enhance yourself and push yourself up. Like, we're all doing the work. Healing is not a joke. Healing is a long, long journey. It's becoming like, it's my life. I think that, like, I'm gonna spend my whole life healing. Sometimes I listen to Esther Perel, and she talks about sometimes, like, some certain recoveries, it's like a whole lifetime, like you're recovering a whole lifetime. It's like when she talks to some of her clients, like she's doing, like, sessions, like with her on her where should we begin podcast. She talks to some people, and it's like there's moments or experience that you have in your life where it's going to trigger more of certain things, which means that I know that the grief is going to be continuous. More grief is going to come. I'm aware of that, and I'm preparing myself for that too, because depending on whatever experiences I may encounter, because I've got a lot of life to live. I've got a long way to go, and whatever experience I may encounter, all of those experiences are going to bring more and more things up, more and more things up that I didn't know, more and more things up that I've got blind spots on. And I'm in a place to be able to humble myself, be like, you know what, these are painful things, but I'm ready to receive it, because I've already faced them before in different ways, and I've overcome them, and I'm still here, and I'm still doing well, and I'm still able to see the beauty and the joys of life. And that makes me so, so grateful. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope you have a great, great week, and I can't wait to be back with the next episode. Love you all. Thank you for listening. Support a bitch, guys. Support a bitch. If you like this episode, please share. Please send it to people that you think will help. Like, please subscribe. Please send me an email if you want to talk to me, because sis is lonely, and I would love to hear from you. Send me a message or a DM, whatever. I put all of my socials link in the episode description on YouTube and on Spotify. So reach out to sis. I really hope like this is helping everybody out here, and I'll just keep putting more and more stuff out. This is also kind of a personal diary for me anyway. So, but anyway, love you all. Bye, 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 bye. We leave that tonight. I'll be the best you ever had. I don't wanna brag. I'll be best you ever had. I got my RuPaul's Drag Race lip sync on, God. Oh my God. Oh, I'm gonna always start with a lip sync to kind of like end the episode to be entertaining as well.